Our 1000th episode is coming out in June. Can you believe it? I want you to be a part of it. Will you leave a voicemail about one of your favorite things from the podcast? I want to know specifics. Was there an episode that you will forever remember? Was there a tip that one of the guests said? Or was there a shift in your brain when you said, I got to go into private practice? I would love for you to leave me a voicemail for the 1000th episode that we're going to air in June. Just head on over to practiceofthepractice.com/voicemail to leave a voicemail for the 1000th episode. This is the Practice of the Practice podcast with Joe Sanok, session number 985. Well, welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast. I hope you are doing amazing today. It is May 1st, and I hope your May is kicking off to a great start. If you happen to be in New Orleans, find me at Jazz Fest. At the time of the recording, I'm not there, but May 1st, my plan is to be at Jazz Fest down in New Orleans. So going to be seeing the Rolling Stones and Neil Young and a whole bunch of jazz and other things. So if you are around in that area, drop me a message on Instagram and let's meet up. So we are talking about your finances today, which I'm really excited to talk about because I think that, there's kind of two types of people we tend to have in our audience. People like myself that maybe have thought about money since they were a little kid. Like I had a Kool-Aid stand when I was 5, and I hired all these neighbor kids to run it, so I didn't have to run it. And my parents would mock me about not mock me. They were nice about it. But they would be like, wow, you are like really good with your money. And they were good with their money too. My grandma, for a long time called me Alex P. Keaton. She'd call me Alex, like from Family Ties. So there's people that maybe money has kind of come easier for you in the sense that maybe you're just a natural saver. Maybe you're a person that tends to naturally put money aside. You always live beyond or live below your means. And then there's also people in our audience that, maybe you just went into counseling because that's what your heart was telling you. And you tend to lead with your emotions more. Looking at a P&L statement and thinking about your financial goals and all of that has been a challenge for you. So today we're going to be covering a lot around just some of those basics in regards to thinking about just like, how do we think about money? How do we talk about money? How do you plan as you grow? So if you go from 50K to 100K, maybe your side gig really starts to take off, or your private practice as a group practice is growing and you're making more than you expected. Like what should you be thinking through? What should you be doing? Kind of all of that. And that's where Eric Roberge comes in. Eric is the founder of Beyond Your Hammock, a wealth management firm helping professionals in their 30s and 40s use money as a tool to design a life they love now and in the future. Eric's been featured in the Wall Street Journal, Market Watch, Entrepreneur Magazine, and has been named to Investment News 40 Under 40 list, as well as Investopia's top 100 most influential advisors. He also writes for Business Insider, Forbes, and Kiplinger, and hosts the Beyond Finances podcast. Welcome to the show, Eric.
It's great to be here, Joe. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm really glad to have you. Oftentimes on this show, I'm just start with it. We've avoided financial planners because in my experience, the ones that I've known that just take a percentage, it ends up not being, often worth it, for people in my experience. And, I'm really glad that we took some time before we even started rolling to talk through how you think about business, how you think about money, how, a lot of people will choose to just kind of pay for hourly work. And I wanted to say that at the top of the show, because oftentimes I get these questions and I'll, kind of give thoughts on financial planners to people in our communities. So I want to just start with, we can talk about some of that, but I want to start with, how did you get into financial planning, into thinking about money, into helping people set goals for where their money is going to go? Has that always interested you, or was that something else that kind of changed over time?
Well, I will say that what's interested me forever is numbers and math. So it was a natural progression from being in math class to starting to read the Wall Street Journal in college. And I went to school for business. And getting into the world of investments was my next step. State Street Bank, JP Morgan Chase were the bigger companies that I worked for. but I wasn't a financial planner until 2007. And once I got into this world, I realized that there are so many different types of people in financial services that provide products and services and investment management and you name it to the end client. And it was really confusing for me, and I was in the business. So I can only imagine how confusing it is for other people who are not in the business, but looking at it as a place they may be able to get some help. And so, you know, building my business from the ground up has been an eye opening experience for me. And I really want to make sure that people understand that if you need some help, there are many types that can help you. You just have to understand what you're looking for and make sure that the person that you go to can provide value for what you need because they help people like you.
Mm. Yeah, so I started with, kind of some of the negative sides of financial planners. Like, what do you see in the field that maybe previous generations of financial planners haven't done well, and what are things that you think maybe need some clarification for the average listener in regards to just having people help with financial planning?
Yeah, I mean, the word financial planning was never in the industry, it was investment management. I mean, you started by way back in the day, it was you needed somebody to trade your stocks and your bonds. And so you had to call the person up that was the broker and said, I need to trade this and that. And a lot of times those brokers would be selling you the next hot stock. And it was just a transaction game. And nobody really won except the broker. And over time, there's been a lot of evolution, and I won't get into the details there. But at this point, there is this thing called financial planning that is zooming out from just investments and looking at the most comprehensive level of your personal financial situation that touches on goals and priorities and values that you want to live out in your life. It looks at your financial circumstances, like your cash flow, your income in, your expenses out, and your balance sheet, which is your assets and your liabilities. And it says, you know what, based on what you have going on right now and based on what you want to do, let's try to make a plan so that you can achieve your life goals the way you want to achieve them and overlay an optimization to help you take advantage of the right growth rates, the right risk management, the right tax optimization, so that you can do the best you can with what you have and feel good that you have your eyes wide open and you get some light shined on the things you don't know.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. I feel like the things you don't know that you don't know is such a common thing. I was just meeting with a consulting client before this, and we were talking through just like what I look at each month in regards to my numbers. So looking at profit and loss, looking at what programs are costing, like what's our profit margin there. Every month I do a net worth calculator to just have an idea of overall like what's growing, what's not growing. If you think about the average therapist, the average small business owner, let's just start with some of the phases that they should be thinking through in regards to just where they're at, knowing the big picture blueprint, and then we can kind of drill into some of those that are specific to people either starting or growing their practice.
Sure. So is that a question for me, or is that just the
Yeah.
topic we're going to get into now?
No, no, let's do it. Let's dig into like what phases do you see people that need to like what are the different phases that they should be thinking through kind of step by step in regards to their planning, their thinking about money, just big picture.
Well, I think the first thing and the most important thing that's always going to be the most important thing is cash flow. And in the beginning, when you're starting a business, I mean, I know this from personal experience. 10 years ago, starting my business, you may not have much, and you still have expenses regardless of how much money you have coming in. So to be able to shrink down your spending to a place that is sustainable to achieve staying out of debt while you start building an income stream, like that's your main goal. You should not be thinking of anything else but just making sure that you spend less than you make. And then from there, I think a lot of focus ends up being on, well, let's keep our expenses really small. And that's great if you want to keep your expenses tight, live a very simple lifestyle. But as you start to grow your revenue, you're going to want to probably expand your lifestyle and live a little bit more comfortably. And I think that's okay, And a lot of advisors say save, 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 but I disagree to an extent. Because I think as you build your revenues and you can access that profit, which is a whole conversation of itself and how to make sure that you can focus on profit, you want to be able to enjoy your life and you want to be able to spend well today while also saving the right amounts to be able to spend well tomorrow. And only by spending well now or just spending in general now can you actually understand what some of your values are. Did it feel good to spend on that big dinner out? Or were you like, you know what? That was a waste of my money. Did it feel good to go on this big trip? Or do you say, you know what? I'd rather just travel by car and go to a nice place on a lake and make it simple. And so exploring the cash flow side of things by spending on things and then thinking through that spending and how it made you feel is going to help you understand where you should be saving and how to save so that you can live a certain way down the road.
Mm. Now, when you think about that concept, the people that have really grown their wealth over time, and I'm not talking people that inherited it, but that really like they grew a business, they grew their wealth. I know I've seen some TikToks lately that have said, kind of the middle class or upper middle class, they spend to boost their credit score, vacations, nice cars, things like that. Whereas, the rich or the ultra rich are really asking themselves, how do I make each dollar kind of make me more money? Um, like, what are some of the mindsets at that phase or in that topic area of kind of spending, seeing how things sit and fit, and growing your overall um, just like your overall lifestyle that differentiates people that over time are more successful?
Hmm. Well, I think one concept here is that life is not linear. And as much as you might have some foresight into what you think is going to happen in the future, and therefore you can play out, all right, well, I'm going to make this much this year and this much next year, and I'll spend this much and that much, and just draw out a 5 year flow, cash flow. It's going to not be that way. It's going to change. So being understanding of the fact that life is dynamic, there is no linear progression, things will change, you will change, the way you think about things will change. So let's be flexible. Going into it like that is really important. And then from there, the people that are most successful know that this is a long game. Some might call it an infinite game. And if you are able to understand that, you're going to do well for yourself. And that means that saving consistently every single year and putting that money aside into assets that will grow for you and choose your own adventure as far as how you manage the assets themselves, whether you use an advisor, whether you do it yourself. That's not the important piece. The important piece is that you're saving enough money into the growth assets that those start to work for you and compound over time. And every year that you have new income coming in, you segment a portion of that income. We like to say 20 to 30% of your gross income, depending on your goals, goes into those growth assets, and the rest of it is spendable this year. And if you can keep that structure where there's generally an average of 20 to 30% of your gross income going into growth assets over 20, 30-year period, your assets will grow to a place that should sustain you for your lifetime.
Hmm. Now, what would fall in those growth assets? Like what sort of categories would be within that?
Well, I would say anything that is going to probably have some level of risk, meaning there's some chance of loss. So a bank account or a CD or a money market these days actually looks pretty good. But over time, that 4.5% or 5% that you're getting in those accounts averages out to be about 1 or 2%. And so that's not enough to keep up with inflation. So I'm looking at assets that are going to be growing at a rate above inflation for the most part over the long term. So stocks, mutual funds, exchange traded funds are all stock market publicly traded investments. Real estate, um, private equity, and you can get into all kinds of fancy things too. But from a baseline, I think it's real estate and it's stock market. Those are probably the two most common places people put money to grow their assets.
Hmm. Awesome. If you're anything like me, you savor the moments when you get to clock out at the end of a long day at your practice and just relax. Now, this may sound simple, but you know all too well it's never that easy. Demand for after hours calls, answering is real, and it often comes at the expense of our personal time. When you partner with a medical answering service, you get to enjoy your evenings, weekends, and holidays knowing your clients are still being cared for. Well Received are experts in getting you valuable time off the phone. They offer 24/7 live call answering from human medical receptionists, new patient intakes, bilingual services, client appointment scheduling, and client live chat, and so much more. As a Practice the Practice listener, you can get an exclusive 50% off your first 3 months of service. Head on over to wellreceived.com/Joe. Again, that's wellreceived.com/Joe to start growing your practice today. Now, so looking at cash flow, and then what would you say comes after that in regards to goal setting and really planning?
Well, I think once your cash flow gets to a certain place where you're at least living a comfortable lifestyle and you have some money to save and some money to spend, if you are a business owner, that business is grown to a place, it's becoming something separate from you, right? Everybody knows when you start a business, you are the business, your business is you, everything is bundled together, your personal and your professional cash flow. And it starts to expand and you start to separate your business from you and your life. And you have your personal cash flow and you have your business cash flow. And your business becomes its own organism. And if you don't pay attention to that, you probably know this, Joe, because you're talking to people that own businesses all the time, it can get out of control and it can run your life instead of you controlling the business. So it's really important to stay in tune with what your business needs are and not to get out over your skis where you're spending a bunch of money to grow the business and your business grows to a place that is not sustainable for you and you're in the business 90 hours a week. Because I don't think anybody wants to grow a business to a place where all they do is the business. You want to have that separation. So it's really important to pay attention to what the choices that you make today, how that's going to impact you tomorrow.
Yeah, early on, I had a guest that said, "Are you giving yourself a job or are you giving yourself a business?" And that idea of, even if you're in solo practice, to have that mindset of, sure, like when you go on vacation or your kids get sick or whatever, like you're not bringing in that income, but to start to expand into even having virtual assistants or different things that can keep moving forward even when you're not working, and adding in those extra clinicians and because otherwise the only way to really like make more money is either raise your rates or work harder, and there's a certain cap to that, that like you're saying, no one wants to work 90 hours a week.
Yeah. Yeah. And it, there's a difference between people always talk about scaling business, but I think that scaling a business is obviously going to bring in more profit for putting in the same amount of hours. But when you're in a service business, the service is really hard to scale and at least scale well, right? Because you have to duplicate yourself and make another person do the same things that you're doing for you to get out of the business. So rather than doing that and scaling necessarily, which is a nice thing, and you could probably focus on that, but generally leveraging yourself. I think leveraging is really important so that you can start to outsource things that are things that you either don't want to do or you just don't do well, and someone else can do them better than you. And you can pay them in a way that gives you the time to either focus more on the business, big picture strategy, whatever you like to do, or take time away from the business and know that the business is still running. And I just want to share one piece of information. I work with my wife, right? And one of the things that she's always said was in the past was, well, maybe we should keep the business to just the two of us so that we have the flexibility to take time off when we want to take time off. And I kept trying to get this through to her, and I finally did recently. When we take time off, the business stops. So if other people aren't working with us, we don't actually have a lifestyle. A lifestyle practice isn't something that is really small and you can handle on your own. A lifestyle practice is something that you actually can have a lifestyle and still run. And so other people involved in the business to allow you to go on vacation is one of those ways that you can create a lifestyle within your business. And it's really important to understand small business doesn't mean flexibility necessarily. And a big business doesn't mean not flexibility. It's really how you leverage your time and your resources to achieve the goals that you want to have.
Mm. Yeah, I love that idea that, yeah, if you're the main people running the business when you take time off, yeah, that may seem like it's flexibility, but it's not creating that ongoing income that can come when other people are working with you. Um, when you think about as people are, I'd love to drill into kind of startup practices. So people that maybe they've started their practice, they're past just the pure startup. They're bringing in 50K a year, up to 200K. So they're just getting going. They're seeing clients. They might have hired their first clinician. In that phase, what should they be aware of? What should they be looking at? What kind of financial goals should they have beyond what you've already covered?
Well, I think at that stage, you have a business and you have an employee or several, and you want to be able to save money. And maybe when you started, you had the an IRA that you were contributing to before you had any employees, before you had much money coming through. In an IRA, you can put in $7,000 into in 2024, or if you're over 50, you can put in $8,000. So it's not a ton of money you can put in there. And then you might have said, you know what, I can go to open up a SEP IRA, which is a vehicle that you can put as much as, depending on how much income you bring in, $69,000 in 2024. And then you bring on an employee and you realize, well, if I continue to contribute to my SEP, I have to also contribute the same percentage to their salary into the SEP, which becomes really expensive. So understanding how to provide a way for you to continue to save for retirement and maybe reduce taxes in the current year in the meantime, while also being able to provide in an efficient way a retirement plan for your employees is really important. So considering a 401k might be a way to start to benefit yourself and your employees from a retirement program that is sustainable for you. I think that's important.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's great. And then, some things I've heard people do with SEPs, and maybe this is outside of your expertise, is to have a separate like management company that hires you as the owner, as a separate management company that then is contributing to the SEP. Are there any kind of those quick tax strategies that people should be talking to their accountant about to figure out if it's a good fit for them based on the laws of their state and all that? And I know that you're not giving legal or accounting advice, but what questions should they be asking maybe their accountant to look at some of that tax optimization?
Well, one of the things that at this, Q1 of 2024, or I guess Q1 of any year, when you're doing your taxes and you're looking back at the year and saying, all right, well, I'm going to owe a certain amount. This is something that I was just talking to we have a doctor couple um, that works with us. They're both physicians, and he does moonlighting and a lot of 1099 independent consulting work in addition to his regular work at the hospital. And this year he was going to owe $11,000 in taxes. And in talking to his accountant, he realized that. And then he told me, and I said, well, even though you're contributing to your 403b or your 401k at work, you can actually open the SEP IRA up to April 15th of 2024 and contribute into it for your income in 2023. And based on the calculation that his accountant gave him, he could contribute $12,000 into this SEP IRA, and it took his $11,000 taxes owed down to $7,000. So he was able to save money on into investments that are going to grow, but also save on taxes too. And he was able to do so after the year ended. So I think it's really important when you're having this conversation with your accountant just to have them tell you what kind of retirement accounts you can access based on your type of income and the type of business that you have, and the implications to what you might have to contribute for other employees. But ultimately, how can you save money and still grow your wealth?
Yeah. Now, when you're thinking about people that now they've added some clinicians to their practice, they're growing, they're scaling, they're in that under 1 million. Maybe they've also increased some automations where they're not as much doing the clinical work or as much of the operations. They might have a clinical director. So they're starting to put some strategic people in to run it outside of their own time. What else money wise should they be thinking about at that point?
Well, I think there's a decision to make at a certain level of profit. It's, do I take this profit for my own lifestyle? Because I am the business owner, and that's the benefit I have of owning the business is I can pay myself a salary and I can take profit at the end. Or do I put that money back into the business to grow the revenue, hire new people, expand, potentially expand my profit? And where is that point in time where it becomes not a good decision to reinvest in the business? It's a really hard conversation to have because obviously people think reinvesting the profit into the business grows the business and therefore it automatically grows my profit margin. But depending on the business you're in and the service that you're providing, putting money back into the business and growing revenues, doubling revenues doesn't necessarily double your profit. And you're doing just as much work, if not more work, for the same or less money in the end. And then it becomes a conversation about, what am I really trying to do here? Am I trying to grow a business to sell it down the road? And therefore I should reinvest in it and not take profits out right now? Or do I want to make sure that I'm separating my personal life and kind of giving myself the freedom to let the business go at some point because I have enough of my own assets to provide for my family down the road? And there's at that certain level of business, I think just around the $1 million mark, I think that's a great conversation to be having to understand what you're truly trying to get out of your business and out of your personal life.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think that that's such an important question, as people are growing their business because, you think about, putting money into, say, Google Ads campaign. You want to open a third location. It may take a while. It may not be successful. It may be a gamble that you think you're investing in the business, but it's not. Also, that whole idea that just because you scale it up doesn't mean that your profit margin stays at as high a percentage. Maybe it was 20%, now it's 13% as you have more operations. So I love the idea of thinking through where you're headed. You mentioned potentially selling the business. That's something that we get questions on, and we've covered as we've talked to people about buying or selling their practices. What are your thoughts as a person that's kind of in this financial space in regards to if people think in the next, say, 3 to 5 years that they want to sell their business? What are some things that they should factor in right now as they're thinking about that?
Well, I mean, this is something that I'm not looking to sell my business in 3 to 5 years, but I do focus on the value of my business and what makes it more saleable down the road. And I think getting an outside party to come in and look at your business and actually value it. How much is it worth based on your current setup? And what is going to increase the value of the business? And it might be things that are different than you think. Because, for an example, for my business, I I think we have a great online presence, a great website, and we have a good flow of potential prospects coming in from what we do online. And I was told by the company that helped value my business that based on the size of my business, none of that matters. What matters is the revenue that you have coming in and your growth rate over the last couple of years and new clients that you bring on. Like that's it.
Mm.
And in a sense, I was like, oh man, I'm wasting all my time on this other stuff and trying to get all this, these marketing things going. But as I started to think through that, I realized that no, all those marketing things are growing the business. So the growth rate is dependent on these other things. So it's not like it doesn't matter. It's just not a direct impact to the value of the business. So I think it's really important to get that valuation, talk to consultants, maybe like you, Joe, just to understand what is the value of my business based on my peers and how do I compare to those that may have sold recently? And how do I grow my business to a place I can sell it for more in the next 3 to 5 years?
Mm. So awesome. Eric, the last question I always ask is if every private practitioner in the world were listening right now, what would you want them to know?
I want everyone to know that even though life can feel out of your control, there's certain things that you can really focus on that are 100% in your control. And it's things like how much you spend, how much you save, where you put the money that you have saved to invest, and for what reason. You have that control. And to be able to do this over 10, 20, 30 years, most people stop short of the results because it takes a long time to compound, whether it's growing your business or growing your wealth. There is a consistency that needs to be there, and it takes a long time to compound, and you have to be patient. And if you can do that, then you are going to reap the benefits of being patient because most people can't.
Mm. So awesome. Eric, if people want to connect with Beyond Your Hammock, connect with you, where should we send them?
My website does a great job of explaining who we are, what we do. If you want to work with us, you can click the top Work with Us button and go to a place to schedule a time. If you just want to gain some new education, the podcast and the blog links are there too to really just understand what we do, how we talk about things. And if you're a DIYer, you can probably scrape some things from the website to take with you for free to just do better for yourself.
So awesome. Well, thank you so much, Eric, for being on the Practice podcast.
Thank you, Joe. It was a great time.
Well, I'm not sure what you got out of this show. Would love to hear from you as to what you got out of it. But I know for me, I'm going to reevaluate my SEP and just see if I need to reconfigure some things. I actually texted my accountant while we were talking just to make sure that I am aligned with what I should be doing. So, it's conversations like these that we're doing, 3 or 4 days a week with this show that are really helping you move the needle forward. Whether you are just getting going and you have our 28-step checklist that you downloaded at practice.com/new, or you have a mega group practice and you're in group practice boss and you're growing and helping other people and also continuing to learn from others. No matter your phase, we have something to help you. Over at practicethepractice.com, there are all sorts of resources. We do behind the scenes. We help with websites. We help with marketing. We chop up videos. We help people launch podcasts. We do all the behind the scenes podcast editing, and we do all the forward facing consulting to help you grow the business. So if you want some consulting, you can head on over to practicethepractice.com/apply. If you're interested in chatting with me for 30 minutes, we'll talk about how are you going to scale? What are your thoughts in regards to where you're headed and where you're at right now over at practicethepractice.com/apply. Also, we could not do this show without our amazing sponsors. And today we have Well Received. And if you're anything like me, you savor those moments when you get to clock out after a long day, hang out with your family, relax. It sounds simple enough, but as a practice owner, after hours calls, they happen. That is money down the drain that you're missing. But when you partner with a medical answering service, you get to enjoy your evenings, your weekends, your holidays. I just took a great trip with my kids to Canada. If I had a counseling practice, I sold mine in 2019. But if I still had one, I would want to have 24/7 live answering with a real human that's bilingual, that can help with the intakes, can get people scheduled in, do all that live counseling chat. You can actually get 3 months at 50% off over at wellreceived.com/Joe. Again, that's wellreceived.com/Joe to start growing your practice today. Thank you so much for letting me into your ears and into your brain. Have an amazing day. I'll talk to you soon. Special thanks to the band Silence is Sexy for that intro music, and this podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regard to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, the producers, the publishers, or guests are rendering legal, accounting, clinical, or other professional information. If you want a professional, you should find one.